Hello, and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Comics. I'm Todd A.
And I'm Taylor Trask.
Good evening, Taylor, even though we will put this out in the morning. It is not morning time.
It is not. Full disclosure, you were in my hometown this past weekend when we would normally record for a little bit of I'll just call it a refined adult bachelor's weekend. Because I don't want to give the impression that it was a hangover kind of situation. It was
only the most expensive prostitutes.
Yeah, exactly. See, we're recording this on
escorts.
Escorts. That's right. They are professionals. We should recognize them as such.
Do people do those kind of bachelor parties anymore? They must, right? There's like a whole culture of bros that still bro down.
And it seems like Las Vegas has been basically taken over for male bachelor parties. Nashville, where you're originally from and where I've spent a lot of time, is now the female bachelor party or bachelorette party capital of the world.
Yes.
And
yeah, we did discuss the movie Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks, which I recently watched.
We did. That's right.
Yeah, so it is not morning time. Are you drinking a coffee?
I am. Funny enough, over the weekend, I ran out of all beans, so I had to go down to the store and buy some today. And today, like in weeks past, I am drinking another round of beans from my good friends at Switchback Coffee here in Colorado Springs. And it is the Institute blend from Switchback, which is named after the street, Institute Street, on which Switchback is based. Their roastery and their cafe are right there. And it is their cheapest bag of beans, but it's also their most versatile. There's a lot of good flavor notes. It works equally well in a French press as it does in an AeroPress. That is what I asked them. I said, give me the one that's the most versatile. I just want to make, whatever I can. Good medium body. So far, the tastiest one from them I've acquired. Really, really like this one.
What was the coffee we were drinking this weekend at your house? What did we drink? Do you remember?
It's the golden. It's like golden era.
Well, I'll tell you, we did go to shout out to Sonder Coffee, which was delicious.
Yes.
And I also had a Dazbog coffee while I was there, and I didn't have a coffee at the Wild Goose, but you did.
Yeah, Sonder. It's funny. I have a Sonder Hydro Flask mug that I take into other coffee shops, and it's the only mug where I can go into another rival coffee shop, and they're like, "Oh, Sonder, they're so cool." Like, it seems to be like the one coffee brand that like other coffee shops and baristas are like, "Yeah, I support that." They don't give you like a weird nice look, like if you bring a Starbucks mug.
How dare you? Yeah. Well, I did not have any coffee in my house when I got back, and went out and got some Keen beans today. I got the Kenyan blend, but I'm not drinking it now because if I have coffee after like 2 p.m., I'm a wreck at night. So I'm drinking a Reed's Extra Ginger Brew, a ginger beer. So
got it. And ginger beer, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a long time-honored tradition stretching all the way back to the original incarnation of the Todd and Taylor Show. And Todd is a connoisseur.
Episode number 11, I think. Actually, I'm making that up. I'm not really sure.
Somewhere in there. Go back in the back catalog. You'll find it.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, holy shit! It was episode 11.
Good memory.
I've been digging through the archives recently for various projects that we're working on. So speaking of projects, this was a special project this episode. We are talking about one of our favorite books in recent month, and possibly our favorite superhero book in the past 6 months. Would you say so?
I would say yes, and I would add on to that. Currently, my favorite Batman story. Period.
And that is. Oh, I was waiting for you to say it.
Oh, it's Batman: The White Knight. Which,
Batman White Knight. Yeah.
Yeah, it came out published by DC, of course. It just concluded. It was 8 issues in the run. I'm sure the trade paperback is coming. I bought it all on Comixology/Amazon, so I am waiting for the hardcover trade to come out because I really want to own the physical piece of it, especially when we start talking about the art. I'm going to gush about this book, but yeah, it's been one you and I have been talking about for several months now waiting to like jump in, and it finally concluded. So I think it's a good time to jump in.
Yeah, I told you a couple weeks ago. I had gone to an Avengers Infinity barbecue get together, and I think I ended up. Oh no, it was a WonderCon. I ended up gushing to a friend about White Knight, and then I realized, oh man, when I saw him like 3 months ago, I had also gushed to him about White Knight. So I've just been talking about this nonstop to anyone. So it's good that it's wrapped up, and we can kind of, put a pin in it. We talked about. I have too. Obviously, we've been reading these single issues. So we had talked about maybe covering it a few episodes ago, and then it was like, no, we got to wait till it's wrapped up.
Yeah,
it is interesting for me to hear that you are reading it, or we're reading it all on Comixology and stuff. I haven't gotten into that as much on single issues. So,
interesting.
I had missed. You told me to like sort of the second month of its run had told me I had to pick it up. And it was so sort of simultaneous to me reading something cool about it. So I went out and issue 2 was out. I could not find a reprint of issue 1. So I ended up buying that on Comixology. But since then I've had the single floppy issues like in paper. So
that's so interesting because and we'll get into this more in just a second, but this book, and for those of you listening, it was written and drawn by Sean Murphy. So one of the, we tend to like it's not exclusive, but we tend to like the books that were written and drawn by the same person.
It's a lot because, an interesting perspective,
Yeah, and you really get that cohesion. It's like when a movie's written and directed by the same person. You really get a sense of the full vision of what they were trying to achieve. And I know some of the best writers can't draw for squat, or don't want to draw. So it's like the Grant Morrisons of the world. They draw a little bit, but they're not. They hand that off to better people. So it's not like we're exclusively in the bag for illustrators, writer illustrators, I should say.
And I would say vice versa. There are some artist illustrators, we won't mention any names, that we may both like, and I don't find their writing as sharp as their art, So and definitely in the last issue, which we won't discuss right now, but I was definitely in that. It struck me as there were so many like cinematic moments where there was a big action scene and then sort of little panels around it, and I found myself thinking like, oh man, that's a cool choice that the artist did right there for that angle. And then I'm like, oh no, that was the writer. Like,
yeah. Well, and take this back to the format. Like I liked, because Comixology / Amazon View lets you look at everything panel by panel for the most part. Every once in a while, something will incorporate other panels. But this was such a cinematically drawn book that I felt like I was at no time did I feel like I wasn't watching this like as a TV show. Like I could hear the soundtrack in my head. I could hear the dialogue delivered by voice actor. Like this felt like either the best animated movie or the storyboards for the best movie that we haven't ever gotten for Batman yet.
That's really, I didn't even think about that because to prep a little bit for tonight, I was going through issue 1 on Comixology, and it's such a smooth, like you just feel it like flipping from panel to panel is really like going through a storyboard or watching, kind of a stop motion television show or something. But I did find in that last issue, and certainly throughout the series, although I can't pick any moments out of there off the top of my head, where there's a full page sort of action happening and the single panels are placed over that action. And so if your guided view is not showing you that full page layout, you're missing a little bit of this like great design that they've also got going. But I'll start out with the what we wanted to clarify first was just sort of the overall pitch of the story from Sean Murphy was he pitched a role reversal. Joker is going to be the good guy in this story, and Batman is going to be the bad guy. So that's kind of what we wanted to state at the outset, and we will get into the plot as we go forward. And we've already started talking a little bit about that art, but do you have any other feelings on it? Any other thoughts?
Oh my God. So first and foremost, I mean, the story is amazing, but the art really sold me.
I agree.
If you've listened to past episodes, I get pretty finicky with art a lot of times. Like there are books that I recognize as groundbreaking and truly achievements in the industry, but I just don't like them because of the art. I mean, I appreciate them, but I just don't. They're not my cup of tea. This was not that. This from panel 1, I was just on board, and it was a lot of different things. Like I've read a lot of Batman books that, some of them are drawn really well, like Killing Joke is very stylized. Dark Knight Returns, very stylized. This follows in that tradition, but this is the first time I've ever read a Batman story where I believed in and loved every part of Gotham portrayed in it. So
yeah.
like, it's pencil line art. And that's very, very obvious as you go through it. So strangely, I know DC's been doing kind of a run of black and white versions of classic stories, and some of them work really well and some of them are just money grabs. I would love to see what this looks like in that same format, because I would imagine the pencil drawings are just as gorgeous as the colorization. But the colorist is Matt Hollingsworth, and he does a great job. Like the everything about it, the way it's drawn, the way it's laid out, the attention to detail. And then Hollingsworth is Matt's Hollingsworth's, I can't say Hollingsworth's, his color palette is kind of that. It's full of grays and browns and muted tones. So it really gives Gotham that sort of dingy, 1940s kind of Gothic feel, but it still has a lot of contemporary elements to it. But it's I think the first time since maybe, God, that the very first Tim Burton Batman movie, have I seen Gotham rendered in a way that I thought was completely appropriate. Even things like you're in Commissioner Gordon's office, and it will be just kind of like a throwaway shot or two, and he will draw like the desk with like really cool, like, antique ornaments around it, or just the way it's kind of accented. And like there's a coat rack that has, that's a timeline specific coat rack, and just everything that kind of comes together really just makes this world feel vibrant and lived in. And you feel like, oh, this is the Gotham I've always wanted to see portrayed. It's not Chicago, via the Nolan movies. It's not, the crazy cartoony, Joel Schumacher or even Adam West TV show. This is like, it's gritty, it's dirty. It feels a little dangerous, but it also feels really, cool and antique, and just all of it. Yeah. It's a place I would want to visit.
Yeah, it had character. It wasn't, even though that, that palette had a lot of those grays and dark blues and stuff. It wasn't like a super gloomy version of Gotham, which we're used to seeing. And it wasn't all rooftops. Also.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So there were, it opens, the first issue opens with this car chase where Batman is being especially careless in how he's chasing the Joker. Mm-hmm. And you see like all these different parts of Gotham through that chase. And it's, it's really neat. Like he drives on the roof of some houses and rips off their shingles and stuff. And, and it's like not, it's not those big, dark, tall buildings that we're used to seeing.
Yeah. And I really want to note too, that the art pays very special attention to light and shadow, both on buildings and just the aesthetic of the world, but also on characters. And that's another reason I really want to see this sort of in just black and white, to see how well that translates from the original drawings, because it's really freaking well done. And it's light and shadow is almost a character unto itself. Gotham's a character unto itself. But just the entire aesthetic, and this translates over into things like Batman's costume. This is the first time, and maybe just because I haven't read as many Batman stories as you, or maybe like the big DC fans out there, but it's the first time I've ever seen the Batman costume rendered this way.
Yeah.
It's got a high collar. It's got sort of like the cowl. It's got the short ears. It's more of like like a rugby helmet more than anything. The cape's got the high cowl. The cape also has like the really kind of cut up back. So it's not just like a straight, Superman, bottom of the cape. It's very stylized. Everything, his utility belt's very sort of urban commando. The entire Batman costume is one that I can really believe a vigilante detective, kind of masked person would wear. I mean, it looks like something he would wear for this purpose. Yeah, it's not ridiculous.
I really like that collar. It's very much like a parallel to Commissioner Gordon in the trench coat all the time.
Yeah.
Like it just looks like he's got the collar flipped up, and then the cape always sort of covers his shoulders.
Yeah.
So it looks more like a
coat.
cloak or a coat.
It reminds me of like if you've watched the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock, it's exactly it's that same look and feel. Like Sherlock always has the the high collar, and just he kind of uses the coat to conceal, to kind of protect himself from the outside world that he goes through. But yeah, it's just this is the first Batman costume that I'm completely on board with, and really want to see depicted in a movie. Like everything in this book, I want to see. Visually, like in the real world. I think they could easily do it.
It's that thing we've talked about before, where it's like you just like here it is. Here's your Batman movie. Stop
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah.
some dumb way to tie it into some supernatural enemy. Here it is. This is a classic Batman Joker story that's already laid out, storyboarded for you.
And it's not too like it's not, you know how some of the Batman stories have like really glossy, like the way Batman looks is almost
Yeah.
it's almost
I think anytime you put him in the Justice League, it's sort of a different Batman.
true. Yeah.
And here it was really cool to see. Actually, it felt like the Bat family was more characterized than Batman. I think Bruce has some really good moments early in the series, but then once he kind of becomes a public enemy, it's more about the quote like good guys like Commissioner Gordon, Barbara Gordon as Batgirl, and Dick as Nightwing. Are they're more characterized than Batman at that point. He's kind of just a brute.
Yeah. So let's jump in. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say exactly what you were gonna say. We should probably jump into the story.
Yeah, definitely, because there's so much. I mean, and I'll keep gushing about the art as we go because it is one of my favorite drawn books I think ever.
Oh yeah, totally agree.
But the story starts off with like you said, there was this chase, but before that, the opening scene, we find Arkham Asylum and Batman's in a cell, and he is visited by a gentleman, like a city official flanked by some other people. Find out that city official is Jack Napier, who is completely normal, no makeup. He's not the Joker. He's got just regular hair. He's been elected in some way, shape, or form. It's not clear as to why, and he's confronting Batman, who's now chained up in Arkham, and it just that sort of tease this whole dynamic up. You immediately want to go, how did this happen? How did we get to this point? Yeah. And it does that thing. And some people call this lazy when it's like 4 weeks earlier, but it works so well here because you're stuck with that in your mind. Like, okay, that's where we're headed. Somehow the Joker turns good and is elected an official of Gotham, and Batman's in jail. Like, what the hell happened? And then we cut to that scene that you described where Batman's chasing the Joker through Gotham. And the Joker's, I think he's on a scooter.
Oh my God, he's on a hoverboard.
Okay, and he's he's going crazy, complete disregard for any property, anything. And they eventually Batman corners him, and is it like a drug manufacturing plant?
Yeah. Or it's just some kind of warehousey place. Yeah, I think maybe it is called a drug, not like a pharmaceutical drug warehouse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and they fight and they scuffle, and it's clear that Batman has finally had enough. And he ends up stuffing a ton of pills down the Joker's throat and just keeps, and like everybody's kind of watching. Like he's, I think is the news there at that point, Commissioner Gordon's there watching. Everybody's kind of seeing it happen. And you think that, oh God, he's going to kill him. He's going to kill the Joker because he's finally had enough. He's stuffing all this down his throat. Lo and behold, the combination of drugs that he stuffs down the Joker's throat actually helps repress the Joker personality and allows Jack Napier to come forward again. And it's not clear how long Jack has been repressed, you get the sense that it's kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of situation. Yeah. And that, again, that aspect is really cool. I don't think we've seen, I know it's been done before here and there, but we haven't really seen a whole story dedicated to the Joker fighting this duality inside of him. And treating like two different guys. Yeah,
physically too. Like he just transforms, like you mentioned in that opening scene where he opens the cell at Arkham. Yeah, it's like a cleaned up official.
Yeah,
but there's just a way that Murphy draws it where it's like, yeah, you can see the shape of Joker's face. And what I was not aware of till I Wikipedia'd this was that I guess that Jack Napier name originates from the first Tim Burton Batman.
Yep.
And so there was sidebar. One of the really great things about this is, it feels like it's kind of a side story of Batman. Like, I don't know if they're going to intersect this into the canon. We will talk about a couple of events that I don't know that those are now in the current canon or not. But it was very respectful to a bunch of Batman history.
Totally.
It's like so that Jack Napier reference and like all the Batmobiles, there's a whole bunch of Batmobiles that are all like, the whatever you want to call it, like the garage full of Batmobiles that are from every TV show and movie and former comic. Yeah.
And let me say this too, because I want to get this out of the way now. As I was reading through this, it occurred to me the best Batman stories, at least my favorite ones, but I'm going to argue the best Batman stories are always third act stories. Like when you pick up an ongoing series of a comic, it's almost always second act, right? Especially ones that are, like the big two. So you have that original story, but then everything else after that is second act for 40, 50 years, second act. And it's rare that we get a third act, because when there's a third act, then that means the story's over. So, Dark Knight Returns, third act story. Killing Joke, third act story. This one, third act story. Spoilers, at the very end, Batman basically, it's not definitively clear that he's done being Batman, but he makes a pretty major move that you could consider the conclusion of him as a character.
Yeah.
And just the way everything kind of wraps up and tidies up, you think, oh my God, this could easily be the last Batman story.
Yeah. And so which is a reveal. I mean, that I don't think is too much of a spoiler to give on it, right.
No. I mean, and it's not anything we haven't seen before, but just the whole arc kind of exists as a third act. Like it's clear that these guys have been fighting for years and years and years, but it's alluded to that Batman's, close to retirement anyway. He's kind of at his wit's end. And a lot of that, just sort of fuels his irrationality throughout the story. He makes a lot of dumb decisions, or at least they seem dumb at first. And then you find out later on some of them might have been calculated, but he just has he's really pissing off everybody around him. And you kind of feel like, oh, this might be the last adventure he goes on. Like this might be his Moby Dick,
One of my favorite things is in that opening scene of the chase, Nightwing has to show up on his motorcycle and rescue the civilian that's, thrown out of the way, of the Batmobile. And he makes a snide comment to Batman about you're not caring for people if you got the pedal on the floor the whole time. You're being too careless. And he says to Batgirl, you got to rein him in. And then the Batgirl has this great line where she goes, "Dude, he doesn't listen," which I liked just as oh yeah, okay, we're talking like that.
Yeah, and it's so
Batgirl.
You could read this if you haven't ever read a Batman story before. You could read this and enjoy it, but it definitely rewards people who are familiar with canon. Especially as you get closer and closer to the end, there's a lot of really cool moments that even for someone like me who's a casual fan, I'm not the hardcore Batman fan, but I love when done correctly, I really love that character in that world. But there's a lot of moments that are just oh, they did it, they pulled it off.
And we should probably get a little bit more into the plot, which is just in general terms, which is so Jack comes out of this, transformation of the Joker, but then he's basically more or less addicted to the pills. They don't, he's not cured once and for all. He has to continue taking these pills. So he's kind of on the edge. And then, what I also found from reading some of the origins of the story were that, Sean Murphy's, theme about the role reversal was, well, we can't just make Joker a superhero, and no one's going to accept him as a cop. So how will he become a crime fighter and Gotham's White Knight? And the answer is he becomes a politician. And so he starts this a campaign in coordination with Duke and from Backport, I believe is what they're talking about, which is interesting. And they through that way they're rehabilitating Joker as Jack Napier. So you want to take it from there on this next note we got?
Well, and Jack Napier too, before I get to that, he's not just immediately all good. He still has huge moral gray areas, and he's working through those and wrestling through those. And sometimes he makes really good decisions as Jack Napier, and sometimes he makes terrible ones, and he's constantly kind of wrestling through that. But the angel on his shoulder, and this happened, I'm pretty sure this was issue 1, because this was also sort of shocking but really satisfying. When the story starts off, he's with Harley Quinn, and it's a Harley Quinn who looks just like the Margot Robbie Suicide Squad version of Harley Quinn.
Yep.
She's got the ponytails and everything. After that kind of first opening adventure, he's back as Jack Napier, and the original Harley Quinn shows up, the one in the sort of the playing card outfit. And you realize that she was the original one. This other one was a new one who came along later. And so Harleen Quinzel coexists with this newer, younger, sort of hotter hipster Harley Quinn, and the OG Harley kicks out the new one and basically takes off her costume and shows Jack that she can be normal too, and she's always wanted this.
Yeah.
And she becomes sort of like, she and Jack have strike up a new relationship, a healthy relationship. Like, it's kind of cute. You really start rooting for this couple. You're like, oh my God, I never thought I'd want to see this. And then she kind of functions as the angel on his shoulder. For the most part, every once in a while she can't help herself, but like she's legitimately wanting him to be good. And she's, helping kind of advise him on what to do to be respected in Gotham's eyes, and kind of what the steps he has to make. So it's really cool to see that pair really function, in the right way for once, and really actually achieve a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah. And so then the new Harley Quinn, she goes off and sort of with the rogues gallery, plots this whole thing to take down the city. But as you noted in our notes, just, for us, was that it's kind of sidelined. It's kind of like the background noise. Like that's the, motivating action for a lot of the scenes. Like they're having to combat this newer Harley Quinn, with this whole rogues gallery of like Clayface and Penguin and all these people.
Well, they did a really smart thing by taking the entire rogues gallery and basically making zombies out of them. Spoilers, and from this point on, there will probably be fair to decent spoilers. But I don't
think we should spoil anything let's not.
Well, it is important to say kind of how, like, through a really clever way, new Harley Quinn, who becomes basically, she gets mad that Joker is Jack Napier, so she takes on this Neo Joker persona.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's a spoiler.
And in doing so, she finds a really clever way to subdue all of the other rogues, all the members of the rogues gallery. So Riddler, Clayface, Two-Face, all of them. Except for Mad Hatter, which is a clue. They find a way to subdue them all, so they're basically zombies for her own, in her own army. And it was a really good decision because it keeps them all out of the way of this, and it makes it just about Batman and the Joker, and then the two Harleys. Yeah. And it's like, if you had these other characters around, you'd always be wondering, why isn't Penguin trying to take advantage of this situation?
Exactly.
Why is because you've got to build enough time for Jack and Batman's dynamic to build out and play out over the course of 8 books, and you really need all those other characters out of the way. Well, one character who doesn't get out of the way, who's really also satisfying, was Victor Fries. We find that he's actually a good guy now, and there's a lot of cool things that he's involved with too. Yeah,
which is, also that happens. What we see of Victor in the first issue, I think we can say without spoilers, which is he is assisting Batman. Mm-hmm. We don't ever really find this out, but Alfred is like medically in bad shape. Mm-hmm. So Victor is assisting Bruce with this technology, the freeze technology.
He has McGregor syndrome.
To keep.
He doesn't, but it's very similar. It reminded me a lot of that scene in the terrible George Clooney Batman where.
Oh God!
They had to get the cure from Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mr. Freeze, to give to Alfred because he had this crazy.
Oh man, I didn't even know that.
System,
I've never watched that movie. But I've watched the first 10 minutes.
Nor do you need to. It's not one that you don't. No one should ever convince you. You should have to go back and watch that to make sure you feel like you're caught up. Like don't. If you do, you're just going to be angry. Just skip it.
Well, but it's another kind of callback to that, I think. And it was also, to me, a little bit of a red herring because we do find out that Victor Fries, like his father or grandfather or something, has these connections to Bruce's father. And so I kind of thought like, is this where the story is going? But it's just more like character building, and some things come out of that medical issue with Alfred and stuff, but it doesn't, that's not the main thrust of the story. It really is about this role reversal between Joker and Batman. Mm-hmm. One detail we need to bring up is that the Joker Jack Napier learns about the existence of this thing called the Batman Disaster Fund that Gotham has, which basically is this, it is the amount of money that Gotham has spent repairing the destruction that Batman has done, which is, I mean, just just because of my profession, I think it's really cool that the Jack Napier uses data to explain why Batman is a bad superhero.
Yeah, he goes into the books, the accounting books, and it's like, wait a second, where's all this money going from? And it's a lot of money. It's like several millions of dollars that Gotham is fronting to basically clean up after Batman. And once it's exposed, Jim Gordon's implicated because Gordon signed off on it.
Yeah.
All the regular citizenry are like, whoa, wait a second. And Jack successfully flips it into a really core political issue for his campaign. It's like, look, this money could be going to other things like libraries and, youth hostels and all the stuff that would really truly help. They tie it back. Is it backwater or backport? Backport. They tie it back to backport.
Yeah.
Pretty successfully. And just you feel like if Batman weren't involved, this would still be a really compelling story about city crime and public officials and money, and this could just be a really cool little indie comic on Image somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was so great. I mean, I was just hooked in issue 1 because it told this story that I've wanted to see in a Batman comic for a long time, which is there are so many books where Batman is just a bully. Mm-hmm. And that seems to have been the thing, probably not in the long-standing, like long-running canon of it, but in a lot of those side stories, I think specifically of like Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin, where he's just brutally beating the shit out of people.
Yeah,
and it's like tough. This is like there needs to be a moderating force in his life, and it's also this really weird thing to me that like Batman has this rule for himself of like, I won't kill, but he will just beat someone, 90% of the way to death. And it was really cool to see Batgirl and Nightwing as those moderating elements, and Gordon trying to navigate this sort of, I mean, I really got that feel like Gordon's in a tricky political situation here because he did know of the existence of the Batman Disaster Fund. He's just sort of known as, Batman's contact on the police force. But he has to respect the legitimacy of Jack Napier once he's elected to that office or whatever. And, that was a cool, tension to watch work out.
But it wasn't, but they didn't just rush into it. Like everything in this book took exactly as long as it needed to. Gordon wrestled with the decision to, whether or not to trust Batman on this whole thing, like numerous times. Like he kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, even past issue 3 or 4. And then finally, I forget what it was that finally put him over the edge, but he finally realized what Jack was saying. It's like, yeah. And then I think Gordon was actually the last person to turn on Batman to the point where like everybody was against him. About halfway through this book, which is like kind of gets us back to that very beginning panel, which is how does Batman get into Arkham? He basically intentionally blows the trust of every one of his friends.
Yeah.
And like nobody trusts him anymore. And Jack is just kind of, and everybody's, Batman's constantly saying like, look, he's still the Joker. He's not good. This is just a big trick. And he's he believes that so deeply, he's willing to do anything to prove that. Jack, he's not only convincing Batman's allies, Barbara and Dick and everybody else on the force, even Bullock. But he's also convincing us, the reader. Like Jack Napier has to convince us that he's, as we're reading along, that he's changed too, and that there's some hope for him. And dang it all, by that halfway point, he'd done some shitty things, but I'm kind of like, dang, I'm sort of rooting for him now. Yeah. Like you want him to succeed. They give you these really cool moments. In between the action where it's Jack and Harleen, and it's just them, them in the bedroom. Maybe they just, got it on or something, or they just went on a date together, or it's, them just talking. And it's like these really sweet little intimate moments where you get to see these two people who've had just, this nightmare past trying to do good, trying to be better, and like, legitimately showing us, the readers, that this isn't just an act. Jack really does want to be more. So like that did a lot to really win me over to his side. So by the ending, it's really satisfying when everything kind of gets sorted out again, like where every character ends up. And it felt like it took exactly the right amount of time to get them there.
Yeah. And you're totally right, because this could have been told in like 3 or 4 issues if we were just looking at sort of like the main action of Batman and Joker switching roles in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was drawn out just the right amount to give us all those little character moments. And meanwhile, to have this, like I said, there's the thread of Alfred and Victor Fries, and then there's the thread of Neo Joker and her rogues gallery. And so they are, of course, then there's this also thing, I guess in the midst of that, as you were saying, when Gordon finally turns on Batman, it's there's sort of a mandate from above that like the Bat family register with the police and become part of this like Gotham City tactical unit.
Mm-hmm.
And so they start wearing, some police identifiers. That was a really cool point too, and then it's leading up to this big background, attack, I guess, from Neo Joker and her rogues gallery. And that's when we have to get the whole team back together to resolve this.
Well, let me point out too, real quick. Neo Joker's motivations are really cool too. She's not. She doesn't want power. She wants Joker back.
Right.
She's trying to do everything she can to either provoke him out, to basically provoke him out. And remember, it's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. Napier's trying to keep the Joker stuffed down. And he's, he mentions a few times, he's truly scared of the Joker coming back. He doesn't think, kind of like, reminding me of Bruce Banner in Thor Ragnarok when he's talking to Thor and he's like, look, if I turn into the Hulk again, I may never come back. Yeah. And it's sort of had that same kind of feel where he's like, I have a chance to do good if I let the Joker back. You may never see me again. And then Neo Joker / New Harley is, she's doing everything she can. So she feels like if she brings she tries a couple smaller sort of attacks / like moves to provoke him out. And then she basically puts all the cards on the table and does this, this big gambit where she takes the entire rogues gallery and, unleashes them onto Gotham. And it's in her mind, she's like, if this doesn't get him out, nothing will. So I just love that that's her motivation. She doesn't want to be the new Joker just cause like she's doing it just to get him, her love back. She loves the guy.
Yeah. And towards your point about Hulk, like that's a great comparison because we do see through the course of this a couple of times where like Joker sort of slips out.
Yeah.
Especially near the end. And so there is this, like you said, we're kind of rooting for him. Like you're rooting for Jack. And there's definitely a feeling of tension of, what's going to happen in this last issue. I really felt that building up to it, so.
Yeah. Did you know it was going to be 8 issues going into it?
That's funny because I had a note to talk about that with you. I did not. In fact, I thought it was going to be 6. And then tonight when I was gathering up all the issues to spread on my desk for this episode, I noticed they all say 3 of 8, 4 of 8. So just not observant in that way.
Well, I didn't notice it either. And it was funny, like this last issue, I downloaded it and I didn't even like at no time did I look and go, oh, this is the last one. I finished the issue and went, oh shoot, it's done. Like this is it. So it was kind of strange and satisfying because I wasn't trying to triangulate the ending going, okay, they have 1 issue left. How are they going to do it? Right. I was kind of just enjoying the ride as it was happening.
That's cool. I did know after 7, I knew that the next issue was the last one. So I was waiting for this to wrap up last week, Got it. But yeah, it was, I'm kind of curious how they're going to do a trade paperback or, like a hardcover version of this, because generally, Marvel and DC only put like 5 issues together to make a trade paperback. So if we've got 8, we're looking at like kind of a jumbo size trade paperback. Yeah. Which seems really, really cool to me for a Batman story.
Well, and it'll probably have all kinds of, bonus features and, director's commentary and all that kind of stuff too. When it finally comes out in hardcover, right now Amazon is showing October of this year for the trade paperback to come out, which is far too long to wait. Like they should have had that ready to go when this last issue popped.
Oh, that would have been hard for me to decide on like, do I want to have all the single issues, I already feel this sense of incompleteness because I don't have one in paperback. I have it on Comixology.
Well, wasn't Watchmen like 12 issues? And now we only think of it in the terms of like the collected volume.
Exactly. And one of my favorite Batman stories ever, The Long Halloween, I believe that was 12 issues too.
Oh.
So it's not unheard of to do anything like that. I mean, this I just can't. The thing is, like all those classic Batman stories, I wasn't in on from the beginning. You know, it was
Yeah.
like I waited for the collection. Yeah, I read DK3 from the beginning, but I wouldn't put that up there in the canon of classic Batman stories.
Definitely not. That one
But
was.
this one felt like what I think you alluded to at the beginning was as soon as, whenever this trade comes out, uh, I'm going to get a copy of it and it's going to go on the shelf next to Hush and
Yeah.
Dark Knight
Ooh.
Returns and Long Halloween,
Hush just kind of put a big dent in my every third act story is the best Batman story, because Hush that was not conclusive. That was just a really good story about that moment in time, if I recall. It's been a while since I read it, but that's much lauded as one of the best Batman stories ever, and it's definitely not a third act story.
Oh,
correct me if I'm wrong. If you're listening, you're like, no, it is.
Yeah.
Please let us know, because that may be apocryphal in saying that, but I'm pretty sure it's just a regular, in the continuity of the time. It's not like, nothing happens that's definitive.
Right. I don't think it was a side story in that way.
Yeah.
Like a non-canonical.
One of the things you had mentioned in the notes is just the Batgirl, Nightwing, Gordon dynamic. And we talked a little bit about it. It's those are the three, as each one of them falls to sort of Napier's charm or logic. It's just one more. You can like Batman takes it very, very hard. And one of the things they do is when they all join the GCPD in an official capacity. Of course, Bruce does not. And they all build their own little kind of Batmobiles, but they're not really Batmobiles. It's like, a souped up Tonka truck. It's like, it's got, a better engine, maybe some bulletproof armor, but they don't look like Batmobiles. This changes though at the very end. There is this amazing moment when everybody's on the same page again, and Batman, he kind of makes a comment, because I think the entire book they're always saying like, look, you have all this technology, you have all these tools, you could have shared it at any time and you haven't. That's a problem. And so at the very end, he agrees. He's like, look, you're all going to get a Batmobile. And not only that, they go back into like the Adam West Batmobile. Every single Batmobile is represented. The Christian Bale Batmobile is represented. Every one of them is there. So that was just really cool to see all that pulled in canon in this story.
Yeah, I totally agree. While you were saying that, I was flipping back through one of the issues to try to find that scene, but I was not in the issue I picked up. And I landed right on the scene where there's this really physical fight between Batman and Jack, where Jack is like shirtless. And it's like during the fight, his hair is no longer slicked back, and it'll sort of caught in the middle of the action where his hair is standing out, and you can see the shape of his face and his hair being a little crazy like that. Like that's the Joker, even though he doesn't have any of the makeup on or anything. And he's angry because he's in this fight. And it's just such a smart way through the art to like, have these hints of him, like of the Joker slipping out in those moments.
Oh, another trick like that they would do is when he's the Joker, he has like two different colored eyes, like a green one and a purple one. And then sometimes when he's like flinching like that, like the hair will be a little disheveled, but the eyes will have switched. And it's just like, again, they did such a I love the concept of him wrestling with this other persona. It was handled so well, and it didn't feel, even though we've seen it in other stories, with other characters, it just felt so organic to the Jack Joker thing, to the point where I would love to see an entire 5 years of run where that's the case. Where like, they need to bust him out of Arkham, and he's able to become Jack again for a little while to help them do, solve something. And then that could be such a really cool, like that gave the Joker a whole new dimension to me that I never knew I wanted. And now I don't want to see him portrayed any other way. When they talk about this, and I don't know if it's still Joaquin Phoenix in this potential Joker movie that Scorsese producing, but I don't even care what they're writing. They just need to adapt this story, because this is like the best Joker story you're going to get. It's the best Batman story you're going to get, in my opinion, because it shows Batman, and it shows him facing consequences for his actions. It shows him there's a lot of really good detective work being done, and some of it was kind of like Sherlock Holmes, where he doesn't reveal what he knows until the end, and you're like, oh man, he knew this entire time. He did this to get here, to get this information, to get this. Like that was really cool, because you don't see a lot of the detective work done these days. It's a lot of it. A lot of it's just like sort of the flourishes of being a superhero. I
Right.
really like it when they ground him in that detective mode, because that's when he's at his best, when he's
Yeah.
deducing things and figuring things out and showing that he's always one step ahead of you.
I
Um,
agree. And along those lines, it's a phenomenal Harley Quinn story. Like
yes, thank
who
you.
knew that I would give a crap about Harley Quinn? But when you get her out of that one-dimensional mold of what is she called? Joker all the time, where she's like Mr. J,
Yeah,
like that is
yeah,
so aggravating and frustrating,
yeah,
and
yeah.
to me. And so seeing her like have three dimensions and take the costume off and work with Batman and the police, and like it was, I mean, that was cool. Like that.
Well, and they were able to kind of cheat a little bit too and give you, like, by having two Harleys, which I don't know.
Right.
Is this the first time they've ever acknowledged that there are two Harleys in the
I
Batman universe?
I don't know. So I don't know if that's like if they're also, that's one of those things where I don't know if that becomes canon because of this, or if it was canon before this and he wrote it in, but it was definitely a neat move.
It needs to be canon now. And if this is the first time it's happened, he's a bloody genius, because it
Yeah.
gives you, it clarifies that weird transition between original,
Yep.
OG Harley and like new wave Harley. It's like, oh, that's because she's a new person. But it also, to your point, it lets OG Harley try on a couple different, shades, of character, and it also juxtaposes that with, kind of the crazy psychotic Harley that still exists in the,
Yeah.
new Harley / Neo Joker. So it really gives you this really well-rounded look at her as a character, and she's got so much agency. That's the best part. She's not just,
Oh yeah.
to your point, she's not just the Mr. J sidekick. She's complex and she's smart, and she might even be smarter than Jack. By the time we get to the end, it's clear that she's very much a well-developed character in her own right.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that was really fulfilling to see. Just all of it. God, so much of it was so well done, and the fact that he wrote and drew it, and was able to do it consistently.
Yeah.
Pop that thing out once a month was just really delightful. Sorry, we've been waiting on this episode for a while, and I was worried it would just become a big gush fest.
Well,
but it's deserved.
I'll tell you one thing that's, to go right back to where we started. One thing that's really neat about the fact that you collected this on Comixology is that anyone listening to this can just go collect it on Comixology, which is not exactly the position I'm in, where I want the paper, like floppy editions of it.
Yeah.
So it's actually pretty easy to go back and read the whole thing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if it's on Comixology Unlimited, because that would totally make it worth it.
Let me ask you about this, and this may be too spoilery too, but that last scene between Batman and Gordon. One of the reasons it was a very conclusive scene, but I love it because it mirrors, I don't know how much you know about the original Batman stories that appeared in Detective Comics,
Right.
but the original Batman story starts with Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon talking. And this is before you know that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Like, it starts with those two guys. It cuts you in on Batman. At the very end of the story, it shows you that this young, effete millionaire is actually the Batman. It's kind of like the big reveal at the end of the first book. So I love that this story pretty much ends. No, it does end. The very last scene is Bruce and Gordon talking. Well, Batman and Gordon talking, and Batman revealing some pretty big information. And just that book ending of it, again, makes it's a third act story, but the fact that he's tying it back to Detective Comics #1, or whatever whatever that issue was. It's such a beautiful, it serves the story, but it also serves the history of the character. It serves the fans who know these little things. Just really, really well done.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a cool perspective to look at that scene, because it actually there are sort of several wrap ups at the end of this.
Yeah.
And so when that happens in the middle of it, I was probably not as affected by that scene as the one preceding it and following it, but it's cool to hear that it was so affecting to you, and especially for that history of it, because that really puts it in its right historical perspective,
Totally.
That's the way we should be looking at it. Like, very, this,
we could go another hour, but I feel like we'd have to spoil so much of it.
I know.
We spoiled some, but nothing. I mean, just bigger, broader themes. And this is definitely like, read this, because there are layers and nuances that will just be delicious to devour. Just like, there's so much.
For sure. Yeah. And when you said layers, I was thinking, one of the really interesting things about this. You also brought it up when you said it's like a detective story. Is it actually has man? You might be right. This might be the best Batman book.
See, it's hard to deny. It's hard to deny.
It does have every element of Batman stories. It has the huge villain fight at the end, with the full rogues gallery done also for the first time in a way that I felt like, hey, that's cool that they're all together because of the thing that we won't spoil. That where they're sort of zombies, and it also has a detective element which runs through it, but then it gets revealed at the end. It has that Bat family element, from Alfred to Barbara to Dick to Gordon. Like it's all sort of, oh man, it really does have everything.
There's a beautiful scene triggered by a letter that Bruce gets.
Yeah.
And that letter, and this is towards the end, and that letter basically reminds him that, hey, look, you've got this family. Don't. Kind of like in the Doctor Who does this a few times too, where the Doctor is constantly reminded, like, hey, when you're by yourself, you go a little crazy. You need these people around you. They help balance you out. They give you something to care about and strive for. Like, don't forget that. Yeah. And just the way that was delivered was just really beautiful too. It just so many, those wrap ups were just so well done. And just like, you kind of felt like, shoot, this could be the very last Batman story ever. And it would work because it all tidies up so nicely. You could see Dick and Barbara go on to, for more adventures if you wanted to. You could see, other stories with the Batman and Joker that could occur down the road. It's you can't read this and the Killing Joke in the same breath. They are two different dimensions. Yeah. Two different realities. So that's never. And same thing goes with Dark Knight Returns. But God, all three of those books are third acts, and it just and all of them are good for various reasons. But this one, something about this one. Every element of it just really freaking worked for me. Yeah,
totally agree. That is Batman White Knight by Sean Murphy. I don't know that we can say anything else about it. Go get it wherever. Wait till October or read it on Comixology.
Get it now. Right now. Get it again in October. Don't wait till October to read it. Get it. Pick it up again and collect it because you're going to want. This will be one that collectors will want to have as part of their definitive library for years and years and years.
Yeah, and we'll probably end up talking about it in like 10 more podcasts. So, at some point we will not be able not to spoil it.
I know, but think about that, real. Like you mentioned this earlier. Like you weren't around when Dark Knight Returns came out, or you weren't buying the issues, every month or every week. It's kind of cool to finally be around from the beginning to the end of a series like this that will be most likely very well renowned for years to come. It's like, wow, I was there. I don't have to come along later and be like, oh, what was it like to have been there, like waiting for each month's chapter to come out? Like we know, like we got to experience it.
I think, I was going to ask you, but I'll actually turn this into a statement. One of the really interesting things about this is I didn't feel any fear while reading it that he wasn't going to do the story right. Mm-hmm. Like I felt like however this wraps up, it like I already trust this, this creative team. Like
I agree.
The right way.
I agree.
I think sometimes we get into those arcs and it's sort of like you get 3 or 4 issues in and you're like, oh man, where is this going?
Doomsday Clock.
Exactly. Before Watchmen.
Oh, Christ. I will argue with you on Before Watchmen, but Doomsday Clock is, I don't know where the hell that's going. I had to stop reading it because I'm like, I don't know when this is going to end, but I need an assurance that it will end in a way that's satisfying. You're so right. This one from issue 1, I'm like, I don't even care where this ends or where this goes. I'm loving the ride. Like, I love the ride. And it's so, you know me, I usually have to skip to the end to feel like, okay, this will be worth my time. And this is the first time in a long time with any story in any medium that I'm like, man, I don't care. This could go on 20 more issues. I trust him. Whatever he wants to do.
Highest praise we can give this book. Go get it. Taylor, while people are driving to that comic book shop on their phones called Comixology, where can they find this podcast?
You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pocketcasts, Google Play, and wherever podcasts are found. You can also find us online. We have a big old website for all our shows called findusthere.org. It's also find us there on Twitter and SoundCloud as well. We occasionally put up new episodes on SoundCloud too, but definitely look for us wherever our podcasts are. Search for Coffee and Comics with Todd and Taylor, and you will find us on all those services.
Yes. And until next week, when we will have another Coffee and Comics, we've been Todd and Taylor. We'll see you later. Bye.
Happy reading.